So, have you ever actually stopped to wonder where the name California comes from? It seems like a pretty basic geography question. But the answer? Well, you're not going to find it on any map.
Yeah, you heard that right. The real origin of one of the most famous place names on the entire planet is tucked away in the pages of a work of fiction, a 500-year-old story filled with mythical queens, fierce warrior women, and, get this, man-eating monsters.
All right, let's dive right into this absolutely wild story. It's time to meet the mythical Queen Calafia, the woman who, believe it or not, gave California its name.
Okay, so our story kicks off right here with what was basically the blockbuster pulp fiction of the early 1500s. The book was called Las Sergas de Esplandian, and let me tell you, this thing was a sensation. Think of it as the Game of Thrones of its day. Everybody was reading it from saints to soldiers. It was a total phenomenon.
And in this super popular novel, the author introduces the world to this brand new, totally fantastical place. He writes, "Know then that on the right hand of the Indies there is an island called California, very close to the side of the terrestrial paradise." And boom, that's it. The very first time the name California ever appeared anywhere.
And this fictional California? It was a wild, wild place. It was an island inhabited only by Black Amazon warrior women, all led by their incredible queen, Calafia. And according to the story, their weapons, their armor, everything, it was all made of solid gold. Why? Because it was the only metal they had on the whole island. Oh, and for getting around, they rode an army of tamed, man-eating griffins. No big deal.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. This character from a book was eventually brought to life. Centuries later, you have artists like Lucille Lloyd, who you see here, painting Queen Calafia straight from the novel's pages. It was like they were cementing this fictional queen as a real symbol for the real California.
So, you're probably asking, how on earth does a name from a fantasy novel land on a real-world map? Well, it's because the Spanish conquistadors weren't just soldiers, they were total superfans. They ate these stories up and their entire worldview was shaped by them. For them, the line between fiction and reality was, let's just say it was really blurry.
And this is the part you really have to get. When the conquistadors got to the New World, they genuinely thought they were walking into the pages of their favorite books. I mean, when one soldier saw the incredible Aztec capital for the first time, he wrote that it looked like the enchanted things they tell of in the Book of Amadis. They were literally looking for the magic to be real. And this just perfectly captures the whole dynamic of the conquest. On one side, you have the Spanish, seeing themselves as knights on a quest looking for fantasy kingdoms. And on the other, you have the Aztecs, trying to defend their very real, sacred world from these invaders who were basically acting out a script from a novel.
Okay, so let's trace exactly how this delusion put a name on our maps. After taking over the Aztec Empire, Hernan Cortés got obsessed with one thing, finding Queen Calafia's island. So in 1535, his expedition lands on this harsh, barren peninsula. He was totally convinced it was the island from the book, and so he named it California, after a fictional paradise of gold. Now, it's easy for us to just write this off as pure fantasy, but you have to ask, why was the idea of a powerful, commanding queen so believable to a guy like Cortés?
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't entirely a fantasy for him. For years, his entire conquest of Mexico had been navigated, translated, and, you could argue, made possible by one person, an incredibly intelligent and powerful indigenous woman named La Malinche. The idea of a Queen Calafia felt real to him because he'd already seen the power of a real-life female leader up close. But this is where our story really pivots. While all the men were off chasing this ghost from a novel, who were the real women of this land? The ones who are actually making life possible in this incredibly harsh place.
Well, first, there were the indigenous Piraquú women. For centuries, they had been the true masters of survival here. They were the main food providers, they knew the desert plants inside and out. They were skilled divers, fierce protectors of their communities. Honestly, their strength and independence probably just fed into the Spanish delusion that they'd found the land of the Amazons.
And what about the women who came along with Cortés? They weren't just some afterthought. On that first colonizing mission to La Paz in 1535, historical records show there were about 37 women. And they were a really diverse group too. You had Spanish wives,
indigenous women who came from mainland Mexico, and both enslaved and free Black and mulatto women. These were not warriors from a fantasy novel. These were the true pioneers, and they were facing the brutal, unglamorous job of building a home from scratch. And that's the great irony in all of this, isn't it? While the men were off looking for mythical gold, these real women were managing starvation-level rations, taking care of the sick, and planting the very first gardens. They were the ones fighting for actual survival, while the men were busy chasing a fantasy. It's incredible how, over the centuries, the meaning of this name just completely flipped. The original name was basically a monument to failure. But then, in the 20th century, a famous song rebrands La Paz as the Puerto de Ilusión, the Port of Dreams. And today, the city proudly crowns a Queen Calafia every single year, turning a symbol of colonial failure into a badge of local pride. And back in what we now call the state of California, the 20th century saw a very similar rebirth. Artists and writers were looking for a unique identity for the state, and they rediscovered the myth of Calafia. They took her story and they transformed her into this powerful cultural icon. Artists from this Spanish fantasy past movement, like Lucille Lloyd, painted Calafia just like she was in the book, a regal, powerful Black queen in shimmering gold armor, with her warriors and griffins right by her side. But what's so cool is that every artist saw something different in her. For some, she was just a character from a book. For others, she was the symbol of that romantic dream that pulled explorers west. And for a few, she became something much, much bigger, a symbol of the land itself. And maybe the most famous version of all came from the legendary muralist Diego Rivera. In his mural Allegory of California, he completely reimagined Calafia. She became this enormous earth goddess, literally holding all the natural bounty and industrial power of the state. And fun fact, his model for this powerful figure was the tennis superstar Helen Wills Moody. So when you step back and look at the whole story, there's this beautiful poetic irony to it. The conquistadors showed up looking for an island of gold ruled by a woman. They found nothing. Their quest for gold was a total failure. But the woman's name? California. That name conquered the map forever. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other epic poems or forgotten novels, or just plain strange delusions, are hiding in plain sight on the maps we look at every single day?